All right, Jess, are you ready for rapid fire?
After all that, I didn't think it could get more fun, but it is time for rapid fire.
That's right. Here we go. So, Tobias Merriweather has been named a breakout player for the season by Athlon Magazine. So, what does a minimal breakout season look like for Tobias Merriweather in your eyes?
A minimal 40 catches, 500 yards, and 5 touchdowns. That's minimal for me.
I
That's like
think I'm
three and
right.
a half catches a game, right around, the half of a lot of people were saying the 1,000 yard mark was too much. I think 750 is a realistic goal, but if you undersell it and go minimal, that I think that's where he drops down to kind of 500, and then a touchdown every other game. You would hope with his big size, he'd be the guy to get a lot of maybe goal line, jump ball, fade kind of routes. So that's where I kind of sat with everything.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, Lorenzo Styles last year, 30 catches, 340 yards, just one touchdown. Like, was that a breakout season? Absolutely not.
No,
But for Tobias Merriweather, if he had those numbers, would you still consider that a breakout season,
no.
or does he have to do? I mean, you kind of outlined, and I'm thinking the same thing as well. I'm thinking like minimal 40 catches, 500 yards, and I think what'd you say, 6 touchdowns? I would
Five
agree with that.
touchdowns.
Yeah, at 5+ touchdowns is kind of what I'm looking at, and like if he has 500 yards with 40 receptions, that's 12 and a half per catch. I think it'll, if it's 600 yards with 40 receptions, it's 15 yards per catch. And I think his per catch, again, we were talking about when we were talking about the offensive players earlier, I think his yards per reception is going to be up there. And maybe some of the other guys, are like, the bigger reception, type guys. But if he has 35 catches for 600 yards, that's 17.1 per reception. And that's, like, even like, would that be acceptable if the receptions are even a little bit lower, but the yardage is more, and he's taking the top off defenses?
I think for me, I like more of a reception guy. I know that not everyone's like that, but to me, production, especially at the college level, you're just getting open and you have the catches, whether or not they're 5 yards, 10 yards, 20 yards. Like, and I know certain routes are designed for certain, positions of wide receiver on the field. But again, I still think with Sam Hartman at quarterback, he's just looking for guys that are going to be open. And so I'm going to go more so with receptions because I think the ball is going to be divvied out pretty equally over this season.
I do too. I think it's going to look, as we've talked about, I think it's going to look a lot different this year. And you hit it on the head. He's going to find guys who are open. Sam Hartman's not going to lock in on one particular guy. Like, this is a guy who knows how to go hit through his progressions. Yeah, there might be a primary on the play, but if the primary is not there, I think he's going to find the guy who's open. So I think we're going to see, a lot of these, many more of these guys. Like 40 might be the starting point. Like, we're going to see a bunch of them around that range. So I can easily see in the, like 45 catches, 600 plus yards for Tobias Merriweather, and that's kind of what I think would be a breakout for him. It definitely can't be in that 30 catch range. I think it's going to be a lot more than that. And I think he's going to have a lot of highlight type plays as well. So Micah Shrewsberry told John Rothstein of CBS Sports that he wants to do something to showcase Notre Dame basketball in the state of Indiana every year against either Purdue, IU, or Butler. He wants to do something, put something together in Indiana in lieu of the now defunct Crossroads Classic that, of course, used to take place every year in Indianapolis. So, do you buy or sell this? What would this look like to you, putting something together? Like, how necessary is this, I guess, first of all, in your eyes?
I find it to be really necessary because I'm a big fan of rivalry type games. And I think that in basketball, when you have the ability for an expanded schedule, especially kind of early on in the season, with your non conference games and Notre Dame playing the ACC, playing in the ACC, obviously, it's tough to kind of schedule those teams in the, you know, later portion of the season. But I think it would be really cool to do, a lot of these teams do like the Maui Invitational, etc. at the beginning. I'm not saying that's what you have to do, but maybe in between that and like some sort of like holiday classic where you get all of the Indiana schools together and you play maybe some sort of form of like a mini tournament. You play like a round robin and then have like a championship match, or you just do two semis and then the winners play each other in some sort of championship, and it's deemed kind of like the Crossroads Indiana champion or something like that. It just along those lines. I think it's a good idea where you could play, some of those teams early on, and they're both usually all, relatively solid teams. So it helps your out of conference schedule. And it's a good kind of stretch of games before you would have to start your conference schedule.
Yeah, and I mean, they did the Crossroads Classic for 11 years. Notre Dame was 4-7 in the Classic, and of course they played. They alternated between Indiana and Purdue every year. They never played Butler, and that's a thing. Like Mike Bray never wanted to play Butler, and part of that was because Butler was better than them for a while, and so I think that it kind of came down to that. I just don't know. Like, it seemed like the Crossroads really lost its buzz, because it was for Indiana, it was either going to be Butler or Notre Dame every year. For Purdue, same deal, Butler, Notre Dame. And I think part of the stinking in it is like Notre Dame never got to play Butler. I just don't know. Like, would you do it on home courts? Like, I don't know what else, where else there is to go, because these are the four most major basketball programs in the state. Obviously, you have Indiana State and IPFW, but it serves Notre Dame no benefit and these other schools no benefit to be playing them all the time. Like, it's almost like, you do like the Indiana Challenge or something where, like maybe you're playing, either you play all three of them every year, because Indiana's already going to play Purdue. So all they've got to do is add Notre Dame and Butler. Either you play all three of them or you just rotate, through with like a home and home, that kind of rotates over the years.
And then that's kind of what you'd have to do. You either have to play them all at once, or it's not like you can just pick and choose playing one of them or two of them in some sort of like classic. I think you play all of them, or you, like you said, you rotate like Butler home and home, and the next year IU home and home, and the next year Purdue home and home, etc. Between that kind of pool of four, you're just rotating between home and homes amongst the four of them.
Yeah, preseason Chi-Town preseason All Indiana tournament at Hinkle Fieldhouse. I would not be opposed to that. Indiana and Purdue might not want to go to Hinkle, but at the very least, like if you're Notre Dame, I think that would be a cool opportunity. And Shrewsberry obviously coached down there as well. He's got some connections down there. One of the many problems for Notre Dame basketball, I don't want to say many, like there's this huge long list, but one of the problems is there just haven't been traditional rivalries, as especially since they got away from Marquette and DePaul. They got away from DePaul because DePaul stunk for so long, and Marquette, they used to play both of them back, in the Big East days before Notre Dame headed to the ACC. But like ACC wise, Boston College is the closest thing Notre Dame has to a rival, and because they're a private school, like the whole state of Indiana thing just really doesn't mean as much, so it's like it's hard to find some kind of true thing that would be natural that they could sort of jump into. I guess it's tough because of the lack of natural rivals. All right, this is a long one. Despite its massive $7 billion TV contract that will televise its games in primetime on NBC this fall, the Big Ten's got a little turmoil going on. According to a story from ESPN.com, there's been pushback from a number of Big Ten schools, including Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State, to play those late November night games because the conference has traditionally not played night games after the first weekend of November because of what they say is health, recovery, and campus logistics reasons. So some of these schools don't want to play these night games in November. Coaches and administrators are saying former Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren never told them they'd be playing November night games before he signed this TV contract. Are these gripes legitimate, Jesse?
To me, these gripes are ultimately not legitimate because, every team in the college landscape plays a night game at some point, and just because it's a past a certain time of the year, I don't buy that as necessarily being an excuse. I just think that they're kind of being dramatic ultimately at the end of the day. And I get it, you don't want to get in super late after a game, but again, it's everyone has to do it. There's always late games, and when I think that it if they want the maximum amount of money, and that's what that contract was for the television, those games got to be in the prime time. No one wants. I gripe about having to watch Big Ten. The big noon games suck, and I know that the Big Ten liked it for a long time because they're getting out ahead of early, and they're the biggest game, on at the earliest part of the day. But when you're redoing TV contracts, it's all about prime time television, and that's when those games have to be. So if they want the money, you can't complain about when you have to play the games ultimately.
That's exactly it. Everyone's, patting themselves on the back, and everyone wants to join the Big Ten because of this big TV contract. Well, part of getting the big TV contract is there are some concessions that you have to make. If you're going to have a TV partner with your conference, there's some concessions that you've got to make. And this is one of them. Like, Notre Dame plays night games almost every week in November. There are a couple afternoon games that they get, but I mean, think about it. Thanksgiving weekend on the road, playing a night game. They'll play a night game against Clemson for the second time, second year in a row this November. There are multiple night games that they have to play, home or away, and like campus logistics and all this stuff. It's November in the Midwest. It ain't like it's 20 below zero and you're in Alaska or something. Like the presidents of all these universities had to sign off on this TV contract, and they're all trying to pass the buck now to Kevin Warren like he left them with some bad deal. Now, there were, some other little issues, I guess, that have come up that have kind of forced them to give some of the money back because, little things. But in terms of playing night games, again, it's like, this is the world that we live in. If you are a marquee team, you've got to play some primetime games. That's what everyone has to deal with today. We talk about it every week. Once the season gets started, you've got to play some night games, and the biggest money comes from playing those primetime games. You got this big deal that everyone's in love with from NBC. Well, guess what? The whole contract with NBC is primetime games. So you can't say that you didn't know you were going to have to play primetime games in November. November is part of the season. You're taking the paychecks. You got to play the games when they say you're going to play the games. It's just as simple as that. I can't believe that there's this kind of whining going on after all this, because again, they're trumpeting the great Big Ten TV contract. You got to suck it up. That's what it comes down to.
Oh, yeah.
So yesterday we predicted the Michigan record for the season. Today we're going to do Tennessee. The Vols have a Vegas over-under win total of 9.5 this year. So here's what their schedule looks like. They start off with home games against Virginia, followed by Austin Peay. Then they're at Florida. Then they play UT San Antonio, followed by South Carolina, Texas A&M. They're at Alabama, then at Kentucky. Then they host UConn. They go to Missouri. They host Georgia. They finish off at home against Vanderbilt. The over-under is 9.5. What's the win total for Tennessee going to be this season, Jess?
I think maximum 9-3, and at worst 8-4. I think those are the two probable landing spots for them. I actually don't see them going over 10 wins, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and ESPN, by the way, I saw today, ranked Tennessee's schedule as the 11th toughest in the nation. With teams like Austin Peay, UT San Antonio, UConn on the schedule.
Missouri.
That is the 11th toughest. Now, they do have Georgia and Alabama. Okay. But I just, they beat Alabama last year, high-scoring game. They got thumped by South Carolina 63-38 last year. They've got a new quarterback, Joe Milton. He was actually on Good Morning Football this morning, and that was kind of interesting to see. They just plastered Vanderbilt last year, the fourth straight win in the series for Tennessee. But I see 3 losses. Georgia, Alabama, right off the top. I don't see them beating Alabama 2 years in a row, unless there are some real issues down there. And Texas A&M, like I don't think you can write off Texas A&M. And last year was like the first double-digit win season in like 15 years for Tennessee. So I see him going under 9.5. I agree. I see him as a 9-3 team in the regular season this year.
Yeah, so the way I broke it down is Virginia was a win, Austin Peay was a win, Florida was a toss-up win or loss, UT San Antonio, that's a win, South Carolina, that's a toss-up, Texas A&M, that's a toss-up, Alabama's a loss, Kentucky's a win, UConn's a win, Missouri's a win, Georgia is a loss, and Vanderbilt is a win. So if you take that combination, you're looking at, I believe, 7 wins, 2 losses, and then 3 potential toss-up games. The toss-up games being Florida, South Carolina, Alabama. Yeah. I just don't see them
winning all those games.
And so that's where I immediately say they're going to lose at least one of those 3 and be at that third loss and be at 9-3, 8-4. I think that they could win one of those 3 games. I think they could win 2 of those 3 games, but I don't think they win 3 of those 3 games.
I agree.
So that's where I just think the 9-3 and 8-4 kind of sits at.
Yeah. I mean, they'll benefit from the fact that they're breaking in a quarterback at the start of the season by playing Virginia and Austin Peay, 3 of their first 4. Like even the Florida game was a close one last year. I think they only won that by like 5 points. So
well, everyone's so high on no, that's Florida State quarterback. Sorry, I got my quarterbacks confused for a second.
Yeah.
In Florida.
Yep. But we're in agreement. I think 9 wins is the max for Tennessee. So NFL owners have voted to allow flex scheduling for Thursday night NFL games this season. The new resolution will allow the league to flip a Sunday afternoon game to a Thursday night game and move the originally scheduled game to Sunday afternoon during weeks 13 through 17 of the season. Games that are flexed must be done so on 28 days notice. So 4 weeks notice to flex it. Do you buy or sell this?
I sell this, and I sell it as in a fan perspective. There's people who plan out specific trips and games and days that they can do. They build around vacation really out in advance. They get hotels out in advance. They get airplanes out in advance. That's the whole reason why you set a schedule. So you follow a schedule. So, call me an old timer or whatever, but I just feel like it really screws over some people who are like legitimately coming. This is like the only game that they could potentially make all season. They're really big fans, whatever it might be. And now if you flex it, I get it. 28 days is still a lot, but like, what if that doesn't work? What if they can't move around vacation, hotels? Like there's just so many variables that you have to move. And it's not fair to someone who, again, that might be the only game that they're looking forward to going to in that season.
Yeah. And it's a big sell for me as well. And I see other people selling it. And obviously the NFL doesn't care about fans, because I think if they had bothered to ask fans, I would guess that at least 80% of fans would say,
well, get all about themselves and what games can make them the most money.
And what were we just talking about with the Big Ten? TV partners. Yeah. And that's exactly it, because you've got the TV partner. Now you've got to start moving games around. But if you're moving, it's one thing to change the time of a game from like 1 o'clock to 4:30 or even 8:30.
But we're changing 4 days.
Right. Because you and I have been looking at that Dallas Buffalo game in December in Buffalo. It's a couple hours from where you live. It's like, can we make this work? Well, we've got to work around, whatever happens with Notre Dame football, whatever happens with my schedule, with Notre Dame women's basketball, like if it would fit and all these different things. And so 28 days notice isn't going to mean anything, because if we get you get the tickets, then, all of a sudden moving a game from Thursday or, Sunday to Thursday and vice versa, that's a huge difference for people who actually want to travel in and see the games. So it's a massive sell. But again, they're accommodating a TV partner that's only been with them for 1 year, because Al Michaels bitched on the air last year that he didn't like the games, even though, I'm sure that Al Michaels still cashed his multi-million-dollar checks for calling stinky Thursday night games. But
now, being bitter about it.
Yeah, but now we've got to flex games out because of it.
And Derek had the wise comment of, I hope they flex Dallas often. I hope they flex the Detroit crappy Lions off football television permanently.
That's right. Well, and the other thing is if they end up not flexing any games this season, they would roll it to next season. So this is like a 1-year experimental deal, I guess. But if they don't flex any this year, they would, roll it to 2024 and they would still be able to flex them. And the other thing too is 28 days notice to do this also means that so if you're doing it for a December 17th game, that means you've got to make your decision in the middle of November. And one of the two teams that you decide that you want to flex, their fortunes can turn really quickly. That could turn into a non-relevant game pretty quickly if they lose a couple games in a row and find themselves out of the playoff picture. John says all games should be played on Sunday or Monday. I don't disagree with that. I think Thursday is one of the dumbest moves they've ever made, but they're making extra millions with the TV.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's all about the extra money, but they don't care about player safety, the logistics of it, the reality of it.
And that's the other thing too, is you're potentially, by doing this, there are going to be some teams that end up playing multiple Thursday night games and other teams that end up playing no Thursday games. And that means, if you're playing multiple Thursday games, that means short weeks rest, whereas other teams are going to get full rest more often. Derek says, as a Lions fan living out of state, I hope they get flexed, then I can watch them. That's fair too. NFL approved another rule today that gives teams the ball at their own 25-yard line if the receiver makes a fair catch signal. Do you buy or sell it?
I sell this in the NFL. I think it's great for the college. It's, again, a tier below the NFL. But, and again, this is all about player safety, and I get it, trying to drive down concussions and everything. But to me, if special teams are going to be a part of the game, then they need to be implemented that they can, physically – that they can be accomplished. Why not bring the kickoff back 5 yards rather than push the kick return, out 5 yards? So I'm a fan of making the kickoff work because I think it's a vital aspect of the game and something like, to me, special teams are a third of the game. And so the more that you take away from it, it just feels like, why are we even bothering with special teams kind of as a whole? At least in my opinion.
They'd love to just get rid of the kickoff, but that's not going to happen. So this, they're going to this, and you're right. College does have it, and I'll be curious to see how many NFL teams actually employ this. I know that in recent years you have seen teams on their kickoffs either get it to the end zone or do a better job of, kicking it, right around the goal line and then being able to get down there.
I love watching that as a fan because you could tell who the good kickers and special teams coaches are when they're trying to pin a guy kind of to a certain area of the field on kickoff. Like they kick it into kind of like in between the hash and the sideline around like the 2 or 3 yard line. Like that's a mark of a good special teams, in my opinion.
Yeah, I sell it as well, but I guess there has been, an increase in concussions on kickoffs, which is why they're doing this to try to cut them down. Michael says Jerry Jones was the driver of Thursday night package. There's a reason Jerry Jones is in the Hall of Fame. It's because he made the NFL money. It's not because he's an actual, good owner of the Dallas Cowboys. It's because he's made the NFL a lot of money, between the Thursday night package, getting a team back in Los Angeles.
Well, like the jersey and apparel stuff too, right?
Yeah.
TV rights.
Exactly. That's why Jerry Jones is in the Hall of Fame. He's in the Hall of Fame of making money for NFL owners. It's not because of things that he actually did, as
on a football level.
Football mind. Yeah. And I'm actually reading the Jeff Pearlman book about the Jimmy Johnson, Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin Cowboys right now. And we haven't completely, the book where I'm at so far hasn't completely gotten into the Jimmy versus Jerry stuff, but it's obvious who the guy was making the football moves back then. It's like, it's something that I've said all along. Jimmy Johnson was the guy who was actually making the football moves. Jerry Jones was in the same room, so he tried to take credit for it. And, Jerry obviously has a long history of just confounding actual football moves and look at who's won a championship since those players have matriculated off to the Hall of Fame that Jimmy Johnson drafted. So Chi-Town says Jerry did Landry dirty. As much as I hate to admit it, I don't like the way it went down, but Landry did need to go. The game had passed him up at that point.
Man, if people want to get you going,
Tom
Jerry
Landry.
Jones is the can of worms to open.
Yes, that's right. That's right. All right, well, that's going to do it for today's show. Appreciate you being here. Smash the like button on your way out. And, of course, subscribe, rate, and review. Brian and I are going to be doing a little show tomorrow. So be ready for that one. Driscoll and I together. Rumor has it, commitment coming up tomorrow. And I think we're going to be talking about that. So we will talk to you then. Jess, good time as always. I'll talk to you later.
I'm glad we had some pyramid fun today.
Yes, me too. By the way, I've got a USC writer coming on Thursday, a guy who covers USC, and we'll be talking about what's going on with their athletic director as well as post, like spring football type stuff. So that's Thursday's show. And of course, we'll have rapid fire after that still. Jess, I'll talk to you later.
Sounds good.
IB Nation Sports Talk.